come up with a public notice pursuant to the procedural bylaw for a proper date and canvass council to see if they could come that date as well as staff.
Okay, point well taken. So at this point, I'm going to go back to Councillor Chorley if there's to put it into a formal motion, because I think I perceived it to be a point of discussion. If you wish to put it on. Pardon me?
Sorry, Your Worship, I think we're getting the debate of the motion. It's actually adding the addition to the agenda, and as the clerk, just a recommendation, seems like we're into the debate of it, so adding the addition, that's when this discussion could happen. You could refer the motion, you could do a bunch of different things with the action recommended. So what the councillor, if I can get it right, then maybe Councillor Chorley, it will clarify what her motion is to either add it to the agenda or not.
That's what I'm indicating, so thank you, Councillor Chorley.
Just a point of clarification to the clerk. Can you give us some direction on the options available to us? I don't want to simply turn this down from the agenda. I want to really reschedule this issue and make sure that it is addressed in the month of December. Can you just explain the options?
Councillor Darling?
Yes, as Councillor Chorley's asking, I mean, the debate right now is whether we're going to add it to the agenda or not. Either we vote yes, add it to the agenda, or we vote no, and the discussion ends. Is that a point of order?
Clarification from the clerk.
So that's correct. You can either add it, not add it. There was one motion where council in the past has, or sorry, in addition, referred it to be added to an agenda coming up. That option is kind of, it's because we don't have a scheduled meeting. The next one would be January 6th. So council would have to on the spot is approve a meeting date, which could be, so just looking at my calendar now, the 9th or the 6th would probably be the date if we continue with a Monday. But again, this is the additions to the agenda. So again, with that motion, you could refer it, do different things with it when it gets on the floor, when you get to that part.
Okay, does that help, Councillor Chorley?
Again, just to clarify, if the only way to schedule this for another meeting is to add it to the agenda and then refer it, just is that what you're saying, Mr. Larmer?
Through your worship to member of council, that'd be the cleanest way to do it. Or we pick a date on the additions to either add it, not add it, or pick a date and say refer the addition to the agenda, the two items to this meeting. You could do it right at the additions and not add it. So if you do that, you won't be able to debate on the motion at all. It would be just referred.
Councillor Chorley, does that help?
If I heard correctly, the option to refer this to a special meeting, which could be scheduled, you said, for the 9th of December? If that's a possibility, I would put that on the floor.
And Mr. Larmer, just the point of that, would that give you enough time for notification?
You have to, so special meet, I'd have to look at the procedure bylaw. If you want to give me time, I can do that. Just because I have to look at the notice. I know it's 48 hours for a special meeting, so we could meet those timelines for a special meeting. If council want to do a special committee of the whole meeting, that would still fall under the provision of the bylaw. So 48 hours would be the notice I've actually had to give, and that would give notice to the public. It could make the newspaper as well. So 48 hours, yes, it's coming to me now.
Okay, so are you clear on that, Councillor Chorley?
And just to clarify, do we have a date for the Accessibility Advisory Committee? Any fixed meetings in the month of December?
Just looking at our schedule, I don't see any accessibility advisory committee scheduled for December on Civic Web. That doesn't mean there is one. I'd have to get back to council. I'd have to search right now. Just if you give me some time, I can figure that out.
Councillor Burkett?
I can't recall what meeting it came out, but I believe there was a motion from the Accessibility Advisory Committee to council for a recommendation to have the extended hours going forward into the 2020 year. And I believe that was referred to budget, from us into a meeting. I can't remember the dates on that, but I do recall that. So I know that the Accessibility Advisory Committee was in favor of this thing because we had it come to the committee. They knew it was going away come January, so they did make a recommendation to council. So that motion would be, do you have that, Mr. Larmer?
Thank you, Mr. Larmer.
So the next is December 18th. That would be the next meeting date, which would be past the 9th and the 16th. So that would mean the only Monday left in December would be the 23rd of December.
23rd?
Correct.
So Councillor Chorley, back to you. Or Councillor Darling, I'll go to you, then back to Councillor Chorley.
Yes, Your Worship. This is just an extension of service. We're not changing the service or making any drastic changes whatsoever. It's just an extension of service. We all know we're going to approve the money in the 2020 budget. So it's a case we're going to approve 20, 40, or 77, which is the new contract. So to provide this service and have the people that require accessibility transit, knowing that this service is going to continue, and then we're not going to take another couple of weeks and decide then when they want to make plans too. I think we have to make a decision, and unfortunately the time's right, but it's just an extension of service, and the service we're providing seems to be doing the job. Then we'll have time to look at the whole process, all our transit, and come up with a new plan in 2020.
Councillor Burrow.
Also, Your Worship, through to Councillor Chorley, right now we don't have any accessible taxis. So if we take this service away or debate it or however it's going to go, it won't give enough time for BTS to hire people or commit to their staff. It's going to leave a lot of people stranded because there is no other options. And so, to me, I don't see why we would want to delay this any further. I mean, we also did a motion last week of pre-budget approving on paving for next year. I don't see why this is a big issue. If we're going to change it or morph it in the future, they still need time to do that. So, to me, I don't know why we'd want to delay this any further.
Councillor Chorley.
First of all, I would say that I agree that I'm in support of extending the service. But again, we've had an hour and a half to look at this report. From what I understand, what's in question is not BTS's staffing. It would be Century staffing. Also, the advisory committee did say that they supported an extended service, but they haven't had the chance to look at whether it would be provided by BTS or whether it would be provided by Century, or whether there are other options. Maybe a subsidized taxi program would make more sense, because right now we're looking at costs of $200 per ride is being paid by the municipality, potentially up to $400 per ride. So there are other options. It would be great to be able to look at those. I don't know if that's possible just in the next few weeks. It's probably too tight a timeline, so I can understand why Director Wills has proposed a 6-month timeline. But again, last week we talked about a pressing concern from our accessible transit riders. And they've been talking about how much service they receive in terms of assistance from the driver to help them have a true door-to-door service. No mention of that is in this report. So I want to understand, if BTS is going to provide this extended service, how much assistance is the driver going to provide to help people get from their door to door in a true door-to-door service?
Councillor Beatty, then Councillor Burrow.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 things, and then if I may ask if we can get to, because in the favor of people in the gallery and a full agenda with presentations and delegations, I generally feel that we are debating the motion rather than the addition to the agenda. I don't dispute what you're saying, Councillor Chorley, in terms of that more fulsome 6-month analysis. I think this is a stopgap measure, a short-term solution. I know I can't have it on my conscience that if we don't meet till the 23rd, and we can't come to a favorable measure. And also keeping in mind, not to put you on the spot, Mayor, but I know that you are having your own conversations and collaborations around a similar topic. The ultimate consequence in this, is it the right measure for a short term? Possibly not, but a possible consequence in us deliberating and holding on this is that we are operating no service to a vulnerable population in the height of severe weather. So I think we should just add it to the agenda, continue the conversation then, and follow the director's recommendation on this as a stopgap solution that provides the 6-month review period for fulsome public engagement and the review from the accessibility stakeholders.
Councillor Burrell.
Councillor Beattie just said everything I was going to.
And the only thing I can make aware, when we had the change through the bidding process, I can only share with you, I received extensive number of calls from citizens about BTS, about, from their perspective, what an exceptional service they did provide and what I might call door-to-door to service and going beyond. So I can tell you, I received a great cry when they did not put their own bid, and I can't speak to why they didn't put their own bid forward in the process, but certainly from the citizens, my phone was basically ringing off the hook. So if I went by verbal, based on citizens' call, I would have to say that, at least the ones I received, and they were innumerable calls, they were all very much in favor of BTS, and in particular the personal relationships that they appeared to have with each and every driver. So thought I'd share that with you, because rarely we don't get those, often those type of calls. I think we've had enough discussion. Councillor Chorley, I'm going to go back to you to decide how you like to move with this on the floor.
Based on the will of council, I'll leave it as it is, and it can be added to the agenda. We can discuss it later tonight.
Okay, thank you for doing that. I don't believe I need any seconder on that because it's already been added, correct? Thank you from the Deputy Mayor. Are there any disclosure? All those in favor? Against? Carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interests? Councillor Burkett?
Yes, Your Worship. Under motions, I am declaring a conflict of interest under General Government Services, item number 5, the voice over IP phone system, and as I declared a conflict in previous meetings, and the clerk has received my document for that.
So noted. Thank you. And Mr. Larmer, back to you.
Next, Your Worship, we have the adoptions of minutes of the previous meeting, adoption of the November 12, 2019 regular council meeting minutes.
Deputy Mayor?
The action recommended that council adopt the minutes of the regular council meeting held on November the 12th, 2019.
Seconder? Councillor Darling? Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have presentations. And first, we have Rebecca Carman, Housing Services Manager, Community and Social Services with the County of Northumberland, presenting the Town of Cobourg Affordable Housing Strategy.
Rebecca, I know you've had a long day. I was with you this morning and at the County Council, so welcome to our council chambers, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Is that, oh, it is. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'm here just for a few minutes at the start to welcome Christine Puccini to present the strategy document that you have received. Christine is from SHS Consulting Corporation. I will come and join her at the end for any questions that you may have. We just do want to recognize the hard work of Director McLaughlin and other Cobourg staff in the formation of the strategy. We had invaluable feedback from member municipal staff as members of our working group when we developed both the county strategy, which led to some of the development of each member municipal strategy. So with that, I will welcome Christine. Thank you.
and welcome. And again, we look forward to all the work that you put in as well. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, councillors, for your time. Well, let's see if I can get this going. There we go. I'll just be addressing 3 or 4 items. Can't even see that. Okay, so I'll quickly review the study purpose and our approach. Why an affordable housing strategy, so some of the key gaps for here in the town of Cobourg, and then our recommendations around addressing the gaps, and then there's a section on the impact of incentives that the member municipalities asked us to prepare. So in terms of the study purpose, the primary goal, as Rebecca mentioned, was to develop an affordable housing strategy for the county of Northumberland, and as well each member municipality. And the focus of the strategy is to increase the supply of affordable and market rental housing through a range of tools and incentives. In terms of our process, there was a 2-phase process. So the first phase was around identifying the needs assessment, and I believe Your Worship and some other members came to a presentation we made on the needs assessment back last year around this time. And then the second phase was around developing the actual recommendations or the strategies. And we started with the county strategy, and then after that was done and presented back in March, we worked on the member municipalities. In terms of input, as Rebecca mentioned, there was a working group, and your staff participated in that. There was also 16 different engagements that we facilitated throughout the last year or so, involving member municipalities, planners, the communities, not-for-profits, developers, builders. They all provided us input into the strategy itself. In terms of why an affordable housing strategy, so I'll just start with our actual definition of what is meant by affordable housing. And there's 2 components to this, the rental component and the ownership component. And early on in the study, it was decided that these thresholds would be at the county level. And the reason for that is that it's the way the province funds us and the federal government, or mostly the province, it is at a service level standard at a regional level. So we for consistency, we set the affordability thresholds at that. So in terms of the rental threshold, it's based in December 2018 figures. It's 1,019, and this will be a figure that's updated each year as the new average market rents come out. And in terms of the ownership, the affordable threshold is 316,190. So this would be the maximum. So to receive any incentives or for any program funding, those would be the maximum thresholds. For those of you that might have been part of the county presentation, the county had 6 gaps that were identified. We then looked at each member municipality, looked at your data, and identified the gaps that were unique to your municipality. And here in Cobourg, there are 2. The first one is the need to increase the affordable rental housing options within the municipality. I'm just going to give you a few data points supporting this need in your community. So first of all, as you can see here, this identifies the proportion of households on the left-hand side first, spending more than 30% of their income towards shelter costs. And the top one illustrates Cobourg at around 36.4%, which is slightly higher than the county as a whole at 22.2%. The one that to me is always the most impactful is the next 2, and that's identifying the proportion of households in your community that are spending more than 50% of their income towards shelter, and that's 10.5% as compared to about 8.7% for the county. In terms of core needs, so core need is a measurement that prepared by or used by the federal government. It looks at affordability for sure, like the stat before, but it also looks at adequacy and suitability. Again, you're just slightly higher than the county as a whole at about 15.6% of your households are considered in core need. In terms of what's available here in your community, you actually have a decent number of RGI, means rent income units or social housing units, at around 285. You also have 23 rent supplement units, so they could be in private buildings throughout your community. You also have 47, this is investment in affordable housing units, which are the affordable units created through the federal provincial program. Despite that, there is still a 9-year wait for social housing in your community. So the focus really of your strategy should be trying to address the need for these rental units, if possible, the affordable rental units, I mean in particular. And some of the other data in the report focuses on the need for units for the smaller households, so 1 and 2 person households. So keeping that in mind as you're creating new housing. Your second major gap is the need for housing and support service options, primarily to facilitate aging in place. So your community, as you're probably more than well aware of, has one of the highest share of senior households in the county. So around 42% of your households are led by a senior age 65 or older, and that's compared to 36.5% in the county as a whole. And this has been growing for the last few years. So having an adequate supply of housing for seniors, but options for housing for seniors will be important. In terms of growth, this further illustrates that this segment of your population is growing. 13.5% of growth of all households was in the 65 years and older category. 13.5% there was growth of all households. In just the senior-led category, 38.7% increase was experienced. So you can see that's one of your fastest growing segments of your population. So the reason why we wrote support services as well as the housing options is as people age in place, having an accessible unit is important, as well as having services in the community to allow people to stay in their homes. This chart tries to summarize in one place the summary of your housing gaps. So you can see we've divided the chart into 2 major categories: low-income households, moderate-income households. Actually, there's 3, and the last one is your high-income households. High-income households would be households with incomes in the 30th income decile or higher. In terms of the low-income households, there's just under 3,000 households in that category here in Cobourg. As I mentioned before, the percentage of what people are spending or households are spending in this lower category, it's actually higher than the average that I just showed you. It's about 63% of low-income individuals are spending 30% or more on shelter, and in terms and there's about almost 30% are spending 50% of more of their income on shelter. In terms of what would be required, so this last row that I have there, the type of housing required for these households, rental is important, as well as the smaller households, smaller units for 1 and 2 person households, also the larger ones, so 3 bedrooms for some of your family units. And as I mentioned before, housing with support is needed for this particular group. In terms of your moderate income, so the moderate income households would still be within your affordable housing definition. Their need, it's still there. It's not as great as the low income households. You can see that you have about 14% of households spending more than 30% of their income towards shelter, and just over 1% are spending 50% or more. So definitely not as needy as your low income, but still some need there. And similarly, they need smaller units, some family-size units, rental units would be good, as well as accessible units. So this is really a snapshot of the demand and supply for housing in your community. In terms of the gaps themselves, so as you're aware, while the county, as your service manager, has the primary responsibility for the provision of social housing in the county as a whole, as well as in Cobourg, like other municipalities, Cobourg plays an important role in providing housing along the continuum in terms of your role in setting local official plan and zoning policy and your authority under, for example, a CIP to provide incentives to encourage the creation of affordable housing. We've come up with 28 actions in this report. About 16 of them are related to policy and regulation changes, which are, as I mentioned, official plan and zoning changes. There's about 9 related to programs and funding, 2 related to education awareness, and 1 on collaboration and partnerships. The strategies recommended here build on those identified in the county's strategy, and your municipality has already done a lot, or has a lot already underway in terms of your official plan policy is very solid. We have some recommendations, but there's a lot of good policies already in place. In terms of the incentives, it sounds like you're well on your way to having a CIP in place, and you're already considering some of the incentives. So this just builds on that, on those policies that you already have. What I'm going to do right now is just highlight, and you'll see in green, some of the recommendations that maybe are of most interest or that we thought were important to highlight. So one of the things that was part of our work was to create housing targets for the county as a whole, as well as for each member municipality. So those have been established, have been developed, but what needs to happen next is part of this process will be for the town of Cobourg to review the identified target, which for you is 38 affordable housing units a year, and to have discussions with the county to ensure that these targets make sense for you. One of the other items that I wanted to highlight was, and this appears in all the member municipal recommendations, and that is to develop a common definition for shared housing, and this would be updated in both your official plan and zoning bylaw, and to include this definition. And by including the definition, you would be replacing some of the other definitions, such as group homes, rooming houses, boarding houses. A lot of municipalities are moving to this approach. It helps remove the stigma associated with the terms group homes, boarding houses, and it allows for a holistic approach to not only defining but also deciding where these types of homes are located. So that's something that we're suggesting for all member municipalities. Another one I wanted to highlight under the official plan, and these actions, and this is action 15 and 16, we heard this quite strongly from the engagements we had with the stakeholders. It was also mentioned with meetings we had with the working groups and some of the municipal staff, and that is to work with the county and member municipalities to develop policies and regulations and or a licensing process related to short-term rentals. So that's rentals less than 6 months, and that's in order to protect your long-term rental housing supply. Number 17 is also in all of the member municipalities, and that's really to evaluate the need to develop and implement a rental conversion and demolition policy and or regulations to protect existing purpose-built rental. And I think that's already in your official plan, so just reinforcing that. In terms of programming and funding, there's 2 that I'd like to highlight, 2 recommendations. because you currently have, the town of Cobourg has a couple of affordable housing projects in the works. We're suggesting implementing an interim approach to responding to these applications related to purpose-built rental and affordable housing until the county puts in place its affordable and rental housing pilot project. So that pilot project was identified in the county strategy, and now it's being worked on, but it's not quite in place. So that's a suggestion there. And then secondly, part of this pilot, or part of the strategy as a whole, will be to develop a common application approach for affordable and rental housing developments throughout the county, so for all member municipalities. I think those were the only ones. Yep. So those are the main recommendations I thought we thought would be important to highlight now. The next section is we were asked to prepare a bit of a summary of the impact of some of the various incentives. So in order to illustrate the impact of these actions here, which are recommendations, so action 3 around considering a policy in your OP which states that decisions regarding surplus town-owned land or buildings will prioritize affordable housing. Action 19 is around incentives being provided. Action 20 is the incentives related to building permit and planning fees. And then Action 21 is regarding property tax incentives. Those three incentives, we're just going to spend, I'll just quickly highlight for you a performa prototype that we developed to demonstrate the impact of those incentives. So here in Cobourg, we selected with staff, we thought a 50-unit high-rise building would be an appropriate prototype, and you can see we have a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. We've assumed at least 10% of the units would be accessible. We've assumed a land cost. We've also identified for this purpose that the affordable rent levels would be at 100% of average market rent, which is that exact level I showed you earlier on. We determined that there would be a 10% equity contribution, total capital costs at about $185,000 per unit. We've also assumed in this prototype that a private developer would be owning and building this. There would be a 40-year amortization. There would be some parking revenue, some laundry revenue, and a mortgage rate of about 4.5%. So with those assumptions, what that would result in is, for a financially viable project, the owner would need to charge about $1,251 per month in rent. So that's the equivalent of about 124% of your average market rent. So 24% above what is affordable. If we were to provide, or if you were to provide waivers or grants in lieu of planning and building permit fees, that would slightly reduce the rent to about $1,241. If you were to donate land, that brings it down further to about $1,211. If you were to waive development charge fees, that would bring it down to about $1,200. If you were to provide a property tax exemption, let's say for the period of affordability, that would drop the rent to about $1,150. And then if we were to take all the incentives except for the land, that would bring your rents down to about 108% of average market rent. So almost the target that we were looking for, that 100% of average market rent. If you do include the land, you're just over it at 104%. So you can see the impact that these incentives will have to decrease the rent and make it more affordable. There's 2 other tools that are available. These are both federal tools. I'm not going to go through all of the next slides, but if a municipality provides an incentive or support for an affordable housing project, there is funding available from the federal government, both the co-investment fund as well as rental construction financing. So I'm just going to skip this. These slides here are explaining the program, but I'm going to skip a bit to the punchline of what this means. So this little table here is showing you that without any incentives, without any funding, basically an owner would, for a financially viable project, rents of $1,251 on average would need to be charged. If all the incentives were provided that we listed, this could come down to about $1,090. If the owner, if the proponent was able to secure co-investment funding from the federal government, and if we layered on top of those the incentives, then 30% of the units could come in at a rent of about $896, and then the balance at about that 100% of AMR. So that would be a nice affordable project. If the rental construction financing loan was used and all the incentives, all the units could come in at average market rent. So you can see as you layer incentives and the program federal funding that's available now or financing, that there'd be a way for affordable units to be created in your community. So that's it for now. And I'm happy to go back to the slides I skipped if anyone's interested.
Okay, I was waiting for more. I was
engaged. Sorry.
Thank you. Any questions or clarification, members of council? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Christine. I just wondered, going forward, all the incentives seem to fall on the municipality. Is there anything that you know of that you mentioned at your onset you are the service provider for affordable housing? Is there anything coming forward that you know of from the province that would enable the county to provide incentives through the provincial?
Thank you. Through you. I can't speak to what the province is intending to do with policies and different things. I do know that we have looked at the county as what we are able to do within the Municipal Act. We have looked at, or we have implemented an interim affordable and rental housing policy that allows us to support affordable units. So we are only able to, through the Municipal Act, to support an affordable unit through a tax increment equivalent grant. So we have a policy in place that would allow us to do that up to a rolling average of our yearly housing targets. We see our role as well in terms of looking at rent supplement units, working with proponents to establish level of affordabilities. The level of affordabilities given in the presentation is an average of all the different unit sizes. So they actually look a lot different. It's a very simplified definition of affordability. We are also the sole shareholder of the local housing corporation, so we also see our role in that as a developer. We recently, County Council has approved an Ontario Street project. We've purchased some land to build more housing, and we're looking at intensifying our stock. So we recognize that a lot of the incentives in this strategy are something that is within the member municipal purview, but we do see ourselves as a partner with you on it. But I can't speak to what the province has plans to do.
Other members? Councillor Chorley?
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering, you mentioned having a target in Cobourg of around 38 affordable housing units per year. Would you recommend that we also, in our official plan, distinguish what type of units those should be, whether they should be accessible or the size of them based on the number of bedrooms, or would it simply be 38 units?
Yeah, you can, and I can pull it up for you if you like.
Sorry, we're just discussing it. So I think that the targets that have been proposed are within the county-specific strategy itself. So it could, the municipality could look at doing those things. overall, the county has looked at 90 units per year as our target. That is in line with our current official plan target of 25% of all new units should be affordable. The county strategy does break down how many units should be targeted to the low income decile, so folks who are in the first and second income decile, alongside moderate, alongside accessible units. We haven't looked at the proportion of that within Cobourg. That could be something we could work together towards as per the action item that was talking about looking at a target together. So for example, within the county as a whole, we looked at each of those new units. We're looking to be about 18% of those units for the first to third decile, which was about 65 units a year. Of those, 52 need to be for the lowest income. We also looked at, of the 90 units, only 7 of those needed to be ownership-based units. So the majority of these affordable units do need to be rental. We looked at about 25% of those units needed to be supportive housing. So that supportive housing to mean both any supports that someone might need to stay in their house. So that could be for a physical disability, a cognitive disability, someone struggling with mental health and other addictions challenges, any issue that would need them to have supportive housing. We also looked at 15% of all of those new buildings or units should be accessible. I will note, if you look through some of the incentive slides that we just skipped over and trying to save some time, a lot of these programs have their own accessibility targets. So they're sometimes a little bit higher than this within the units themselves. So that would be something we could consider, but we have not considered a specific number for Cobourg.
Other questions? Councillor Darling?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I was just curious on your recommended actions. You have short-term, mid-term. What kind of time frame are we talking here? Like weeks, months, years?
That's a good question. Should have said that at the beginning, and I already forget, and I want to be accurate. Yeah, so short term would be within the next, up to between now and 2021, and midterm is between 2022 and 2024. And then we have some ongoing, and you have one that we called foundational, mostly because you're ahead of the game on your incentives, and that's one that you should probably, if you can, put in place earlier.
Okay, thank you. The reason I asked was I know staff has a lot on their plate right now, and I was hoping you didn't want this done in a few weeks or a few months. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor, then I'll go with Councillor Beattie, and then Councillor Chorley.
Rebecca, I'm wondering if you could tell me, one of your earlier slides, you mentioned 285 rent geared to income housing, or units rather. You've been at the counties for a little while. Is this going up or down, or it seems a little low for a community of 20,000? And I know you have to put these units throughout Northumberland County, and they don't all come to Cobourg. But I'm just wondering, is that a trend? I mean, we grow at about 1% a year here in Cobourg, according to the last census, the last two. So do you see that going up or down? You also indicated a 9-year wait, but 285 to me seems a little bit low. I know 30 years ago there were a lot of developers that were building apartment buildings, but that seemed to have stopped several years ago. So just comment a little bit on that 285, whether that's a trend up or down, or have we lost some, or are we gaining?
You haven't lost any, but it's been stagnant. So there hasn't been any creation of dedicated rent geared to income units in many years. I wouldn't want to guess on an exact date, but it would be within the 1990s that the last truly rent geared to income building that is social housing or community housing, as we're calling it now, has been built. And I think that's one of the things that we're most excited about at the county is that we are looking at how we can regenerate, intensify, and develop new. I will say that 2 of the projects that went to council our council the last month talked about intensifying the number of units we have on Elgin Street, looking to bring our 18 semi-detached units to at least 40 units. We also have acknowledged that we've purchased a vacant piece of land here in Cobourg to develop more housing, some of which we would like to see as rent geared to income units. We know that we continue to work with our nonprofit housing providers, some of which who are looking at opportunities to develop through federal programs and things like that. So we're working with them as well. Now, again, those units, in order for it to be a rent geared to income as per the slide, it's a very specific agreement around it. But those are the ways in which we're looking to grow. We acknowledge we need to grow across the county, but it does not represent a growth or a loss.
Councillor Beattie?
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, thank you so much. I think this is an excellent example of how the two levels of government can coordinate and co-align on a very important community issue. This might be a moot point, but just to Councillor Darling's observation and a reminder to Council, I think since April, while our interim affordable housing support program isn't fully to what's outlined in the foundational action, Council has approved an interim program as a result of the two affordable housing projects that we're currently working on. So just that as a reminder to Council and the public. But my question is, in listening to this, understanding the need obviously for the larger developments on multi-purpose builds, where in this plan is there opportunity for support and incentives for things like secondary residential units, where an individual homeowner looking to add a secondary unit, renovate a basement for a market rent or affordable market rent purposes, where do those RSUs fit within the strategy, if at all?
Thank you for the question. Yes, those are considered affordable units in this strategy. There are lots of ways to build an affordable unit. Secondary suites being one of them. When we looked at establishing prototypes for each municipality, we tried to look at what could be possible within each member municipality, and knowing that there were a couple of larger projects already underway in Cobourg, we chose a larger project. In other areas, we have run the incentives at a secondary suite level on a smaller scale, so those would count. You could run, in theory, we could look at a program that we could do all of those things. So yes, there is room for it in the strategy. We also acknowledge that taking a private market rent unit and adding a rent supplement to it would create an affordable unit. So there's all sorts of ways that we can work together to build more affordable units throughout the strategy.
Councillor Chorley?
You mentioned as well the suggestion that we introduce regulations to curb short-term rentals. So I'm thinking about Airbnb and other programs like that. Can you explain a little bit more what kind of impact Airbnb units have had on Cobourg? And specifically, what kind of regulations would you recommend to help protect our long-term housing supply?
I don't know.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the first part, and then I'll maybe hand it over to Christine, who has more experience province-wide of what those regulations could look like. I think we're at the cusp of it, that we don't really quite know for sure the exact number of the impacts. We know it exists. We know that there are significant impacts to it. We've heard anecdotally, we've heard, if you look at an Airbnb type website, you know that they're out there and that they're having an impact. In terms of a specific number that are currently provided in Cobourg, and would those units then be transferred into a long-term rental loss? We don't know those specific numbers. We're at the very kind of beginning of that swing. Do you want to talk about some of the possible regulations or licensing processes?
Yeah, I could. And again, I think right now in Ontario, the only municipality, and this just got passed last week, that has a licensing is the City of Toronto. Of course, it's a significant issue there. It's around ensuring, I don't know all the details, and I guess I should have known them, but it's around ensuring that if each unit is licensed, you know what? I actually don't know. That's terrible that I don't know the exact licensing. Do you know it? No. So I should get back to you, or I'll try to get back to exactly what happened with that one. But it is around identifying the units that might be short-term and putting measures in place to ensuring that it doesn't happen on a longer-term basis.
Other questions, clarification? Hearing none, thank you both very much for a wonderful presentation. Mr. Larmer, that can stand on its own merit, or do I need a seconder to receive it? Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have delegations. And we have one delegation. We have Kristina Nairn, Haliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge District Health Unit, on the HKPR District Health Unit's report on living wages, with a request that Council consider the first steps of investigation about becoming a certified living wage employer.
Well, Kristina, welcome. I know you're no stranger to my certainly board meetings at the health unit, but do welcome to the town of Cobourg, and we look forward to your presentation again on the living wage report.
Now I'm on. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Kristina Nairn. I'm a public health nurse at the health unit. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to speak very briefly this evening. I do not have a slideshow, just the one slide that shows the living wage Northumberland infographic that the health unit created. It's an important piece, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the key determining factor that impacts one's health, and that is income. The less money you have, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to have health risks. The less access to needed services, the more likely to have multiple chronic diseases and conditions, and the more likely you are to die at a younger age. The correlation between income and health is well established and much better understood now than it ever has been. And that's exactly why a nurse is giving you this delegation about wages. At the health unit, we worked with the Ontario Living Wage Network to calculate the wage needed in our counties to cover basic expenses and to be able to participate in one's community. The living wage is not a minimum wage, which is set provincially. Rather, it is a voluntary commitment of employers to go beyond the minimum standard and pay enough for employees to ensure that they're able to cover their expenses. Minimum wage, as we know, is not actually tied to any cost of living, and currently the minimum wage is too low to lift even a full-time, full-year employee above the poverty line. The living wage, on the other hand, is based on the principle that if you work full-time, full year, you should earn enough to make ends meet and be able to actively participate in your community. In Northumberland, that means, as it's shown on the screen, $17.95 an hour. That actually is for a two-person working household with two children. That's how the calculation is. If you were to imagine that you were a single individual in a household, that now becomes a low number for you. But the way that the Ontario Living Wage calculation is done, it's based on two working adults with a family with two children in the home. The Ontario Living Wage Network identifies municipal governments as anchor institutions in our communities. They are major employers that support our communities, and they can be models of doing the right thing and set an example for other employers. Becoming a certified living wage employer is a phased implementation process. My presentation and ask to Council is to please consider the first step of the process for the town of Cobourg becoming a certified living wage employer. And I ask only at this point that you begin by requesting a report from staff to identify what percentage already of full-time and part-time employees are paid a living wage or above. The next steps could include then a small working group to continue to address the process by reviewing the application details. I think it's important to take a measured approach and to do it very thoughtfully. I'm happy to help in any way. I provided Council with the Health Unit's report on the calculation of the living wage for Northumberland. And as I said, I'd be eager to work with a small group to continue that process in a very thoughtful manner. Thank you.
Questions of clarification, members of Council? Deputy Mayor?
Kristina, can you tell us how long this group has been active and how many other communities, preferably communities of our size, but how many other communities throughout Ontario have taken this and have actually gone forward?
Deputy Mayor, good question. We would be on the smaller scale. Cambridge is a community who has become a certified living wage employer, but as you know, they're quite a bit larger than the town of Cobourg. So we would be on the smaller end, and certainly one of few to begin actually as a municipality. I think that this is a municipality who has shown a keen interest in progressive matters, and so I think it's a great place to start and a really honorable opportunity.
Other questions? I have one, if I may, Kristina. Often we employ or other beyond the town employee students. Are they part of this calculation, or for some reason are they exempt? I'm just curious.
It really is quite a measured approach. Students are exempt from the calculation for becoming a certified employer. And so it starts out as full-time and then part-time employees. And then the more interesting part, and the part that I think the town would really need to spend its time addressing, are the contracts. So it's whatever work is contracted out is actually the component that I think takes the most looking into. But students remain exempt, and certain short-term employment opportunities and contracts remain exempt.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions, members of council? See none, thank you very much for your presentation. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have delegation actions.
Deputy Mayor, we'll go to you on this one because it may fall more under general government.
Thank you, Worship. The action recommended that Council receive the delegation from Kristina Nairn, Haliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge District Health Unit on living wages for information purposes.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Barreau, discussion. Councillor Beatty?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. If I may, Deputy Mayor, I have a motion to amend just to add some additional direction based on the suggested or the requested next steps from Kristina, if I may. So the motion to amend, my apologies. Action recommended that Council receive the presentation for information purposes, and further that Council directs staff to provide a report to Council that outlines the process and the requirements to become a certified living wage employer, including what percentage of full-time and part-time employees are paid a living wage or above, and further that Council consider creating a working group to continue the process of becoming a certified living wage employer and to review the community-wide benefits of the program pending the findings presented in the report. And the rationale for this is just to, at a minimum,
perhaps I'll get a seconder first before seconder, Councillor Burkett, and then please continue.
Thank you for the point of order. Just very quickly, the context for this is at a minimum, all we would be doing is looking at additional information on what it would look like for the municipality to go through the certified living wage, and if we even had that data to qualify, and then pending that report, we could do further action to continue through the living wage exercise should Council deem necessary.
Okay. Would anybody like the motion read again? Councillor Darling?
No, not to have it meant again, but if I may comment, I just wondered about a timeline. Again, we got staff doing a lot of reports and whatnot. Are you looking at any specific timeline for this?
Councillor Beatty?
If I may, I know not to put the interim CAO on the spot, but I know that he was part of some preliminary meetings on this, and so I know a request like this had come forward, so I would defer it to the interim CAO too. I believe at the time in February was
Mr. Davey?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the councillor's question. I think sometime in February would be appropriate, before the end of February, let's say, to have that report back.
Okay, and could we say maybe the end, just to give staff the full month, perhaps?
Sure.
Would that work? Does that work, Councillor Beatty, in regard of any little addition to your amendment?
Absolutely. So it would be to provide a report to council by the end of February 2020. Just a point of order to you, Your Worship, if I'd have to reread the notice to amend with the additional deadline.
I think the little addition of February 28th is quite clear. I'll take direction always from the clerk.
Through your Worship, that's fine. There's two meetings. There's one committee of the whole meeting in February. It's February 18th. The next committee of the whole would be March 9th.
Can we go with March 9th then? Just to give staff more additional time?
I appreciate the timeline.
Councillor Chorley, saw your hand.
Just a question, perhaps this could be directed through to the interim CAO. Would council be included in the study?
I'll leave that to back to put it on the floor. Councillor Beattie or Mr. Davey, whoever wishes to respond.
I think part of the report would be to look at all employees and see which employees meet the definition as explained by the presenter, and those would be the positions that would be included in the report.
Okay. Councillor Beattie, back to you.
Yeah, just to add to that, I do believe, I'm not extremely well studied on the program, Councillor Chorley, but I'm, to the CAO's point, I do believe that they have specific criteria and classifications of employers. Like, for example, summer students wouldn't be grouped into that. So I think that would be reflected in that report in the process of what qualifies, I believe.
Is everybody clear on the amended motion before us? Any further discussion? Hearing, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I also sat in on a brief presentation with the Ontario Living Wage group, I guess. The reason I asked the question as to how many communities were involved in this, and all we heard was one, and that was Cambridge. And I think we've got an awful lot on our plate. I think that this is an excellent thing for the future, perhaps a year from now. We have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us, and to give our staff more work for a living wage and I think this also comes with a fee if we do become a community of the Ontario Living Wage. If there were 50 communities throughout Ontario that had already, I know Kingston turned this down, and I think it's an important issue going forward, but I think it's maybe a little premature for Cobourg. We're only 20,000 people, and the other steps, you basically start with the staff here, and then you go forward with anybody that we bring in as consultants, anybody we bring in and then it goes further to the entire community. And I think we really, I don't know, to me it's premature. I can't support the amendment because the reason I brought forward the amendment I did is to accept for information purposes because we've got a tough year ahead of us, and it's wonderful to look at living wages, and like I said, if 50 other communities had done this already, I maybe would support it more. But to be the first person of a community of 20,000 people to take this on in addition with everything else we've thrown at staff, I just can't support this.
Okay. Other Councillor Beattie?
Thank you for that perspective, Deputy Mayor, but I'd have to politely disagree with you because I actually think that this is quite timely, and just as the City of Cambridge kind of trailblazed for municipalities of that size, Cobourg could be the first smaller municipality, and we just received a presentation on affordable housing and the social determinants of affordability, and in addition to home security, employment security, and income security is part of that. So as we embark on the conversation of affordable housing and the quality of life and the community health, which is identified in our strategic plan, I actually think this small project is complementary not only of our strategic plan under people and prosperity, but will also inform data for the wider economic sector of Cobourg as we embark on the affordable housing project and other social intersections that will come with it.
Okay, any other discussion? Councillor Chorley?
I'm quite interested in this concept and how it would be applied in the wider community, but in terms of applying it to the town of Cobourg staff, my impression, my understanding is that for the most part, town of Cobourg staff are well compensated. Really, the main category of town of Cobourg paid individuals who would fall below the living wage would really be students and members of council. I'm not sure it's the right first step. I would be interested in revisiting this concept to understand what kind of impact it could have on the community, but in terms of starting with town of Cobourg staff, I'm not convinced that's the appropriate next step.
Okay, well stated. Councillor Darling.
I think if I understood the presentation correctly, we don't have to implement it, but I would like to see a report come back to us and have the information to decide on.
Okay, point well taken. That's correct. Any other comment? Again, back to you, Councillor Beatty. You have the floor with your amendment. Is there any further changes?
I don't think so, Your Worship. If just a point of clarification, if I need to reread it, and if there was a seconder.
Well, at this point, I didn't get any indication from council. I did ask the question, but he wanted it read, and I didn't see any hands go up. So at this point, I'll ask all those in favor of the amendment. Against? Carried. Now we have to go back to the amendment to the original motion.
The action recommended that council receive the presentation, well, it's exactly as I had said it. The council received the delegation from Kristina Nairn, Haliburton, Kawartha, Pine Ridge District Health Unit on living wages for information purposes. And further, the council directs staff to provide a report to council for March 9th, 2020 that outlines the process and requirements to become a certified living wage employer, including what percentage of full-time and part-time employees are paid a living wage or above. And further, that council consider creating a working group to continue the process of becoming a certified living wage employer and to review the community-wide benefits of the program pending the findings presented in the report.
Okay, everybody clear on what's before us? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Against? Carried. And back to you, Mr. Larm. I thought he did. I thought it was Councillor Burkett. I apologize if I missed. Pardon me? Yes, I thought he did. Sorry. Back to you, Mr. Larm.
Just to be clear, Your Worship, for the minutes, just want to make sure the new motion that was amended by Councillor Beatty was moved by Deputy Mayor Sagan and seconded by Councillor Burkett.
That is correct. Mr. Larmer, thank you for your patience.
Next, Your Worship, we have reports. We have General Government Services, and we have number one, which is Committee of the Whole meeting notes held on November 25th, 2019.
Deputy Mayor.
The action recommended that council receive the notes from the November 25th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting for information purposes.
Seconder, Councillor Burkett, discussion. All in favor? Carried. To Planning and Development, which would be Councillor Beatty.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a memo from the Senior Planner of Development regarding an application for site plan approval development agreement for 311 to 325 University Avenue West and 387 William Street. This is for WND Associates on behalf of 2642301 Ontario Limited and 236321 Ontario Limited. The action recommended is that Council endorse the attached bylaw for adoption at a regular Council meeting, which authorizes the Mayor and the Municipal Clerk to execute a development agreement with 2642301 Ontario Limited 2363219 Ontario Limited, and Lakefront Utility Services Inc. for a residential development consisting of a four-story, 71-unit apartment building at 311 through 325 University Avenue West and 387 William Street, Cobourg, the subject lands, subject to the provision of additional and final site servicing and development details in the written satisfaction of municipal staff and applicable agencies, and prior to the removing of the holding H symbol on the subject lands by council, on such matters including but not limiting to design plans, reports, specifications, and requirements pertaining to the stormwater management system servicing the subject lands, particularly the technical specifications and requirements for the sealed underground storm chamber, the discharge of groundwater and/or drainage from the underground basement parking garage on the subject lands, measures required to improve the existing storm sewer outfall at Factory Creek to prevent erosion, the design specifications and costs associated with the installation of all necessary public infrastructure within University Avenue West and William Street to service the subject lands, including but not limited to water main, sanitary and storm sewer, electrical and other utilities, roads, curbs, municipal sidewalk installation along University Avenue West from Margaret Street to William Street, and the restoration of all works and disturbances within the municipal right-of-way. The final design specifications of sanitary service pipe and pre-insulated pipes servicing the subject lands, and other technical site design details relevant to the development of the subject lands as required. And further, that Council grant 264-2301 Ontario Limited and 236-3219 Ontario Limited a 2-year deferral of applicable building permit, planning application, tree and parkland fees and levies for the subject development within the exception of the deferral of development charges as previously granted by Council in April 2019 in the amount of $189,775, the provisions for which will be incorporated into the development agreement.
Okay, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Darling, discussion? Councillor Darling?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question, if I through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. McGlashan. On bullet number 4 says the design specification and costs associated with. Those costs associated, will they be costs for the developer, or would there a possibility of shared costs with the municipality?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Darling, the costs associated with those works will be the responsibility of the developer. There were discussions regarding the water main with Lakefront Utilities, but all of the costs would be borne by the developers.
Other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Against? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have Public Works Services.
Councillor Darling?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a memo from the Secretary of the Transportation Advisory Committee regarding additional parking in the town of Cobourg. The action recommended that Council receive the memo for information purposes.
Seconder? Councillor Burkett, discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Item number 2, a memo from the Director of Public Works regarding the approval to open a single bid for the purpose of excess soil contract tender, CO-19-27 DPW. Action recommended that Council authorize Public Works staff to open a single bid received for the purpose of excess soil contract, CO-19-27 on December 10th, 2019.
Seconder? Councillor Barreau, discussion? Discussion, Councillor Darling?
Yes, if I just may elaborate a little bit on this. We had this tender opening last week. We received no bids on it, and just in case there is only one bid, it's been extended for 2 weeks. If there is only one bid, we're looking for the permission to open that so we can proceed with the tendering early in January. Just a little bit of clarification.
Thank you for that explanation to Council. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried.
The third is a memo from the Director of Public Works regarding 2020 extended transit service proposal. Action recommended that Council pre-approve a 2020 budget amount of $40,000 for extended transit services in the town of Cobourg, and then further that Council endorse a bylaw for adoption at a regular Council meeting, which authorizes the Mayor and Municipal Clerk to execute an agreement with BTS Network to operate extended transit service until July 1st, 2020, and continue on a month-to-month basis until December 31st, 2020.
Seconder, Councillor Barreau. Further discussion, Councillor Chorley.
Thank you. Through the chair, a question to Director Wills. Could you just explain, this could either be for you or for our clerk, could you explain what other options are being explored? I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity for some kind of taxi type service which the municipality could also subsidize, just to bring this cost down and to improve the quality of the service.
Director Wills.
Through the chair to Councillor Chorley. At this time, we don't. We have a cab company that has said they would like to have an accessible taxi here, and the clerk may have to elaborate a little more on that. But to date, they haven't come forward with an actual vehicle into town, which is the unfortunate part, that we don't even have somebody trying to offer the service yet. So again, this is sort of where I'm proposing that we commit to just another 6 months of a trial, continuing the trial for another 6 months, while also exploring maybe that additional 20,000 is some sort of incentive to bring that taxi company or a new taxi company forward to start the discussion of perhaps using that 20,000 to subsidize an accessible taxi. Fingers crossed.
Mr. Lammer, perhaps I'll ask you to elaborate, because I know your legislative services oversee the taxi industry. I'll say my comment, because I know it's been somewhat deplorable in my 9 years, but I'll allow you to comment on the accessible part.
Through you, Your Worship, members of council. So we have had considerably. We've tried our hardest to entice our existing taxi companies to engage and maybe look at investing in an accessible vehicle to put on the road. We've definitely shown them the numbers. We've shared with them privately the actual numbers of the survey of the need for accessibility, which will be coming in January. We surveyed, and that'll be coming in my report January 6th, but the entire town regarding our regarding our taxi cab services in town. And one of the questions was regarding subsidy for accessible taxi cabs. And out of all the responses, it was very favorable for that, and also the need for accessible taxi services in the town of Cobourg. But we've approached some of the taxi current owners, and the cost is too much. These, again, all accessible taxis have to be certified under the Highway Traffic Act under the regulation. MTO has actually certification for that, which is a cost. The other issue is insurance, too, because there is accessibility standards with that. And we know from listening to our taxi cab owners that insurance is a large cost for them to do as well. And we've displayed to them that approach the town with a plan of how much it would cost you to operate this and bring to council, but we have had no prevail from our current owners for that. Like the Public Works Director said, we did have somebody come forward with this process. They did the investigation, they had the vehicle. We were all ready to put the fare reader and the tariff reader in the vehicle. Unfortunately, the cost seemed to be too large for them, that they backed away from the service and they went somewhere else. But we still have the application, and we've been in constant contact, and they're performing other duties. You know, that's, as a business owner, is cost benefit for them than going to the accessible. So again, we're still working as hard as we can with our current and future drivers for this purpose. And I hope once I bring my report in January that council can approve something with accessible. But I think that would be, we're looking at months down the road to come with a bylaw, more public engagement, a public meeting with a big overhaul from that bylaw. We're looking, we have to engage the owners as well too. So it's going to be a bit of a process in the new year for this accessible for the taxi cab bylaw. This is one of the many issues with taxis in Cobourg that will be brought forward.
And I must reiterate my comment. What I meant, and I should apologize, I don't mean service deplorable. I mean, we've given our best effort as long as I can remember in council with very little outcome towards accessibility. For many of the same reasons, I will not repeat that the clerk just reiterated. So it has been an ongoing challenge, not just for this council, but certainly over my whole 2 terms, starting my 9th year. It's just a difficult outcome, at least within our community at this point in time. Any other questions, comments? Go Deputy Mayor, now go back to Councillor Chorley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to direct this to Director Wills. Looking at your report, the conventional and wheels service from Century Transportation that did win the bid going forward have not offered anything further. You mentioned 77,000 in here. With the new operator. Is that what we can expect going forward with Century, and BTS will only be doing it for the 6 month that you've got in this motion with a per month motion from there? So are we to understand from that going forward we're looking at 77,000 a year from Century? And was this not part of the original RFP for accessibility? I thought it was. Did they choose just not to do the accessibility component of it when they won the bid? Or I'm just a little confused that this became an issue last year when Councillor Bureau brought it up, and yet we've given this contract to Century Transportation without making this a prerequisite of what we want this town to service.
Director Wills, thank you.
Through the chair to the Deputy Mayor. So the extended service was approved last year before we had the new contract tendered. And when we tendered the contract, we put in a provision that the town reserves the right to extend the service to 11 if we choose. So their rates that they proposed in their bid were for the wheels and conventional service for our typical transit hours. And then we can use the same rates towards the extended transit if that's what council approves as far as budget goes. So that's where we are expecting them to do it. If that's what you want them to do, then they will staff up and do it. But we're sort of in flux with not knowing whether we should be spending that extra 75 or not. It's just bad timing with the new contract coming in.
Councillor Chorley?
I'd like to put an amendment on the floor, and this is really just so that we can be consistent with the motion that we passed last week. Because this report, my quick initial reading of it was that it didn't provide any analysis on the quality of service provided by BTS. From what I've heard, their service is very, very good, but I haven't had an opportunity to verify that by speaking to members of the public who actually use the service. So just to make sure we're protecting the level of service, I just want to add some wording taken from the motion last week, and further that council instructs staff to ensure that BTS Network provides a true door-to-door service that includes boarding and disembarking assistance as needed.
Director Wills, I saw a little, do you wish to comment on that at all at this point?
Sure, through the chair. So I only can offer that they'll continue to do the service that they're doing. I can't specifically direct them to that's why we do want this policy to be more specific of what does assist mean. I can't suddenly force a contractor to do more than they're doing as needed, essentially. It's just what they're providing seems to be quite fine. Their vehicles actually have a lift. It's a little easier for them to provide additional service because they don't have the ramp to contend with. So typically their vehicles are actually easier to get onto than our wheels buses. So that may also help with their service assistance. So I just want to caution that I can't specifically direct those drivers to do more than what they're doing right now, and what they're doing right now seems to be sufficient.
Knowing the response, if I go to Councillor Burkett and Councillor Darling, do you wish your amendment to stand at this time?
Can you give me some time to think about it?
Absolutely. In the meantime, I'll go to Councillor Burkett, then over to Councillor Darling.
So in regards to the BTS,
Do I have some latitude? Okay, do you wish to withdraw it at this point while you're reflecting, and you can bring it back if so desired, or do you wish it to stand? Because if you do, then I'll need a seconder.
I feel the process is really hindering the discussion here, but for the sake of having a free-flowing discussion, I will withdraw it for the time being.
Okay, so noted. Back to Councillor Burkett, then I'll go to Councillor Darling.
So I guess through the chair to Councillor Chorley, in regards to the discussion that we've had at our committee meetings, I think a lot of the members on the committee that have used the BTS service and the Sentry service, which the Sentry service would be during the day and then the BTS would be in the evening, I feel a lot of them prefer the BTS over the Sentry, because I did have a lot of feedback from individuals about the difference, and as well as my understanding is it's easier to get into the vans that BTS uses versus the bus that we have. And as the director spoke about the new accessible vehicle that we're trying to get and move forward to be a little bit better for people to get on, because I guess if our current bus in its current state, if it comes up to the curb or wherever it is and it lets hit the ramp, if it doesn't sit the proper way and we can't accommodate it, it's very hard to get up. And I think that's where individuals require that extra hand to get pushed onto the vehicle. So I do truly believe that the committee was very supportive of the BTS moving forward, and I heard a lot of, I guess not negativity, but we're not very happy with this service, but we're quite happy with the BTS, and we do want the extended service to continue. So I knew there was lots of lengthy discussions on that, and one question was, why didn't BTS get the contract? And as the director spoke to, the contract required an individual to have a backup full bus.
Okay, so, Councillor Darling?
Yes, through you to Councillor Chorley. I would just caution, from all the reading I've been doing on transit, and could ask Director Wills to confirm this one way or another, I don't think any municipality offers a door-to-door service. So we got to be careful on the terminology. Most services curb to curb. Like, you have to come out of here. So if you live on the 4th floor of a 6-story apartment building, we don't see you up to your door or even the front door of the building. The bus pulls up on the street, the ramp is let down and you're let out at the curb, and then you go into your home. So I would ask Director Wills for confirmation on that, but I would caution using the door-to-door terminology.
Director Wills?
Sure. Through you to Councillor Darling. Yeah, so the term door-to-door is definitely up for defining, and it's not that the driver couldn't assist to their front door, it's just that limit of how many stairs are they expected to lift them up, how many things are they expected to carry, how much weight are they expected to push or pull or lift. Those are the types of definitions that just aren't clear. So driver assistance is one thing. I try to say a light assistance, where they can hold the door and they can hold their purse or bag if they're trying to get their fare, and within the normal means of what a driver's job should be, which is driving the bus and providing sort of a light amount of assistance. It's that area of lifting, pulling, and pushing where we're running into the issues, and that's something that all municipalities, not all municipalities, but sorry, all municipalities definitely do not provide an attendant for any of those types of actions. A lot of municipalities will define exactly what door-to-door means. Some people say one step. Some places say curb to curb. So those are the types of things that I want to sort out in our policy and that we're missing. So it is a door-to-door service, but we're missing that. What does exactly a door mean?
Councillor Chorley?
Thank you for that clarification, but I think really what's at issue here is that we are being asked to make a decision on giving BTS Network this contract for $20,000. We've had an hour and a half notice with the report, which is not enough time to really digest it, speak to members of the community. And also I'm concerned that this report is focused on the cost of the service. It is not focused on the quality of the service. And details about the quality of the service are extremely important to the users. And from what I've heard, there have been members of our community who have been denied a service because the driver hasn't been able to push a manual wheelchair up the ramp into the bus. So I don't want us to be arguing from extremes on this point. And in terms of the actual terminology, door to door, users of the service have directed me to the town of Cobourg's website and paperwork which says door-to-door service. So we obviously need to do some clarifying, and we need stronger, clearer policies on exactly what that service involves. So when we're contracting out this service and we're looking for people who can provide the service, we want to contract it out. I would really have preferred to see some consideration for the quality of service that we're purchasing, not just the cost. I don't want to delay this in any way. It's very important to me that we do have an extended service that continues into January and that's seamless. So I will leave my amendment off the table, but I would just express my desire to make sure that that door-to-door service really does take place, that people know they can get in and out of the vehicle and in and out of the doctor's office door and won't be left on the curb.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any further discussion, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. To Councillor Darling's point, I just wanted to add a somewhat altered perspective. A few years ago, my mom had broken her leg and she was in the hospital. And my daughter had an event that she really wanted my mother to come to. And obviously, we needed someone to transport her from the hospital to the event. Now, the hospital was in Brockville, the event was in Prescott. We paid a fair amount for that service. And the individual came right into the hospital. And he basically helped her get into the wheelchair. When the wheelchair got outside, he wheeled her into the ramp, pushed her up the ramp and helped her and basically did the same thing because we followed him through that whole process. So it is done, and Brockville's a town of about 23,000. Granted, it was a few years ago, that may have changed, but to say carte blanche that this is never done anywhere else, I think we need to discuss this, because from my perspective, from what we heard last week, there is a need for this, and if people get stranded, especially with winter coming and snow at the end of walks, snow at the end of driveways, how's an individual that can't, I mean, what are we defeating the purpose of having this expensive, I'll say it, it's $300 a pop, this expensive service, if people don't have an electric wheelchair and the road hasn't been plowed or the driveway hasn't been plowed, how are they going to get into the unit? If they can't get up the ramp, if they can't get in there, we're paying for a service that no one can use. I mean, I'm sorry, but other communities are doing it, and they are coming in, they are helping, they are pushing up, and I understand your point. We don't want anybody to get injured, but if we're trying to offer service for accessible people in wheelchairs, then let's offer that service. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
I'll take one more because we've had fair discussion. Councillor Barreau, I'll take you as a comment.
I totally agree with you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Chorley. But the way I see it is if we don't make a decision, then we're not going to have this service. I think this would be a wonderful opportunity for the Accessibility Committee to come back with recommendations to Council on how to improve this service. So tonight I think we should vote on this and stand on that.
Okay, I think we've had enough. Director Will?
Sorry, if I may just respond to Deputy Mayor. Just quickly, the wheel service that we're providing is a requirement to mirror our conventional service as an accessible transportation service versus just trying to draw the line between what an accessible service is versus a medical transport. That's where we're trying to work a little bit closer with community care as well, because there is a little bit of a difference there with when there's a requirement for a medical transportation that someone might have to pay for, such as you did with your mother. So versus it being a municipal responsibility to provide that medical transport. That's my definition.
Good point. Thank you, Director. We had fair discussion from all members of council. All those in favor? Against? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have motions and we have General Government Services.
Deputy Mayor?
First motion is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the banning and phasing out of bottled water in municipal facilities and municipal events in the town of Cobourg. And the action recommended is whereas, it's a resolution, whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019.
Point of order, did you have a mover or seconder?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I did. Councillor Chorley is my seconder. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Treasurer, Interim Chief Administrative Officer regarding the unfinished business item 06-2419, the banning, phasing out of bottled water in municipal facilities and municipal events. Now therefore be it resolved that Council authorize staff to begin the process of reducing reliance on bottled water at municipal facilities and events by undertaking the following activities. A, engage the public to determine the current level of support for the banning of the sale of bottled water at municipal facilities and events. B, continue to work with Lakefront Utilities Services, Inc. to raise the awareness of the importance of our municipal drinking water. C, review all contracts with suppliers of vending machines to eliminate the sale of bottled water where it currently exists. D, phase out the sale of bottled water as quickly as possible in all municipal facilities and events, but in no case later than December 31st, 2020. E, continue with the direction provided by Council by Resolution 280-19, dated July 22nd, 2019, to work with Lakefront Utilities, Inc. to find locations for 2 outside water bottle filling stations in the town of Cobourg per year for the duration of the current term of council. This project has been included in the 2020 capital budget for consideration by council. And F, to update the municipal event application guideline or guide to not allow event managers and special event permit holders to have, use, or sell bottled water at municipal facilities and municipal parks to be implemented no later than December 31st, 2020.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
The second is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the approval of the Town of Cobourg Municipal Complaint Policy. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chorley. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Municipal Clerk, Manager of Legislative Services regarding the Town of Cobourg Municipal Complaint Policy. Now therefore be it resolved that Council adopt the new Municipal Complaint Policy, LEG ADM 19, for the handling of municipal complaints within the Town of Cobourg, and that's Appendix A.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried.
The third is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the appointment of the Town of Cobourg Municipal Ombudsman. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chorley. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Municipal Clerk, Manager of Legislative Services, regarding the appointment of the Town of Cobourg Municipal Ombudsman. And whereas the 6 other municipalities in Northumberland and 18 other comparative Ontario municipalities have appointed the Ombudsman of Ontario to review any municipal complaints. And whereas the Ontario Ombudsman is an independent and impartial officer of the Ontario Legislature with authority to address complaints about the administrative conduct of municipalities, universities, school boards, and provincial government organizations, as well as complaints about services for children and youth and French language services. And whereas the Ombudsman role with respect to municipalities is to review and investigate complaints about municipal government administration. When problems are identified, the Ombudsman may make recommendations or share best practices with the municipality to improve its processes, as well as to strengthen local governance and accountability. And whereas once an individual has exhausted their local complaint options, the Ontario Ombudsman can review the steps taken by the municipality to address the complaint. In addition, the Ontario Ombudsman is an impartial officer of the province, and the investigations conducted from the Office of the Ontario Ombudsman are free of charge. Now therefore be it resolved that Council select the Ontario Ombudsman for all of its municipal ombudsman complaints effective immediately.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Number 4 is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the Ontario Government's Municipal Modernization Program, Intake 1, Municipal Service Delivery Review. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Burkett. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November the 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Municipal Clerk, Manager of Legislative Services regarding the Ontario Government's Municipal Modernization Program, Intake 1, Municipal Service Delivery Review. Now therefore be it resolved that Council endorse the expression of interest application form under the Municipal Modernization Program to support a proposed services delivery review project called the Town of Cobourg Municipal Services Delivery Review, to be submitted to the Ontario Provincial Government by the December 6, 2019 deadline in order to receive provincial modernization program funding.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Number 5 is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the award of the Voice over Internet Protocol phone system request for proposal, RFP C01920 ITS. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chorley. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Supervisor of Municipal Information Systems regarding the award of the Voice over Internet Protocol phone system request for proposal, RFP C01920 ITS. Now therefore be it resolved that Council award a contract to simnet.ca to provide a voice over Internet Protocol phone system for the Town of Cobourg in the amount of $99,125 plus HST, to be funded from the approved 2019 capital budget in the amount of $80,000, and further, that Council approve an additional $20,000 to be funded from the IT reserve account to be replenished from the monthly savings from the new VoIP phone system.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Number 6 is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding a request to make interior renovations to the Marie Dressler House for the expansion of the Marie Dressler Museum. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Burkett. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered correspondence from Rick Miller, President and Chair of the Marie Dressler Foundation, regarding a request to make interior renovations to the Marie Dressler House for the expansion of the Marie Dressler Museum to include Mary Pickford and Norma Shear exhibits. Now therefore be it resolved that Council grant permission to the Marie Dressler Foundation to make interior renovations to the leased premises of the municipally owned Marie Dressler House located at 212 King Street West in order to make the premise more suitable for the inclusion of Mary Pickford and Norma Shear Museum exhibitions.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Number 7 is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding emergency shelters downtown Cobourg. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bureau. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a delegation from Alison King and Grace Lovekin, Good Neighbours Coalition Cobourg, regarding concerns about the emergency shelter downtown Cobourg. Now therefore be it resolved that Council discuss this delegation with the Northumberland County, and further that Council requests that the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee provide input and analysis on the recommendations presented by the delegation, and further that Council requests the Cobourg Police Service Board provide information on the level of crime and disruption in the immediate area of Transition House, and further that Council request information of Northumberland County regarding the recent change of operation at Transition House and any alternative options for low-barrier housing in the Cobourg area, and further that Council requests that all information is returned to Council by February the 18th, 2020.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
The 8th motion is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding harm reduction services. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Bureau. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a delegation from Mark Anthony, Cobourg resident, regarding the benefits of harm reduction services in Cobourg. Now therefore be it resolved that Council refer the delegation to Northumberland County to look at ways to improve harm reduction services.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
And the final one, Your Worship, is a motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding Lake Ontario water levels. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a delegation from Colin Bromley, Cobourg resident, regarding the waterfront user needs assessment and detailed design plan and Lake Ontario water levels. Now therefore be it resolved that Council instructs staff to organize a public open forum on Lake Ontario water levels to be held in early 2020.
If I may ask a question, Councillor Charlie, I know we had this discussion last week. It's a very generic now therefore. I just want to know, do you want to put any more details like what staff or which department or any of that at this point?
It hadn't occurred to me to do so, but I'm open to suggestions.
Or if you need more reflection time, because obviously we're not, in all honesty, we're not doing much between this and January 1st. Would you, perhaps we could consider referring it to January 6th? That would give more time for this. I'm not suggesting it would leave, but more time perhaps for the clerk to come back and put a few more details with that. Would that work?
I'm not inclined to do that.
That's fair.
We can assign it to a department if that would help. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Beatties.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to Councillor Chorley, having a chance to reflect after last week's marathon meeting, I'm just wondering if I think it would be important for your consideration to add in now therefore in coordination with the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority, just given in mind their public meetings that they're currently doing on the similar theme, and I think their jurisdiction would be important in that.
Councillor Charlie.
Thank you. It's a good suggestion. I did, just to update Council, I did make some suggestions for the agenda for the coordinator meeting that I'll be having with staff on Thursday. And I did add this item to that agenda. And it was my intention to suggest that we work with the Ganaraska Region Conservation Authority because they are doing their shoreline study on erosion. And they have a lot of expertise. And I think it's very important that we include some of their findings in this public open forum that we are planning for early 2020. If you feel it's necessary to actually stipulate that in the motion, I'm open to that if you want to put that on the floor.
Councillor Biddy, is that your intent? I'm just...
I would move to, I think it's important to have it documented. Thank you for taking that initiative at the coordinator level. So a motion to amend would be then, now therefore it be resolved that council instructs staff to organize a public open forum in consultation or in coordination with the GRCA on Lake Ontario water levels to be held in early 2020.
Okay, seconder for the amendment. Councillor Darling, any further discussion? Just for clarification, you're fine with that amendment per what you were hoping, Councillor Chorley? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? And hearing none, I'll call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Carried. And now we're back to reading the original. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. You're okay with the amendment added to Councillor Darling? Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a delegation from Colin Bromley, Cobourg resident, regarding the waterfront user needs assessment and detailed design plan and Lake Ontario water levels. Now therefore be it resolved that Council instructs staff to organize a public open forum on Lake Ontario water levels in coordination with the GRCA to be held in early 2020.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have Planning and Development Services under motions.
Councillor Beatty?
Thank you, Your Worship. A motion from the Committee of the Whole regarding the review of a public notification, engagement, and meeting procedures for the Planning Act applications. This is moved by myself and seconded by Council Bureau. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Director of Planning and Development regarding the review of public notification, engagement, and meeting procedures for Planning Act applications recommendation report. Now therefore be it resolved that Council approve the following changes to the Town of Cobourg's public notification, engagement, and meeting procedures for Planning Act applications subject to the finalization of implementation details by municipal staff. That signs consistent with the town's corporate branding and image be implemented for all OPA, ZBLA, and draft plans or subdivision condominium applications in addition to existing public notification methods. 2, that Council, oh my goodness, I'm struggling tonight, my apologies. 2, that an informal public open house be convened with 45 days of formal receipt of the application by Council. 2A, for all official plan amendment and draft plans of subdivision condominium applications, and 2B, for large, complex zoning bylaw amendment applications as outlined in the Town of Cobourg's planning application schedule of fees for major residential and major commercial development types, and for rezoning applications which by their nature and or interest to the community as developed by Council at its discretion would benefit from the convening of an open house. 3, that radio ads be implemented for special planning and development projects that affect the broader community. 4, that TV information and message boards be implemented for special planning and development projects that affect the broader community. 5, that planning opinion recommendation reports be prepared after the statutory public meeting. 6, that statutory public meetings of public meetings of Council be convened at least 45 days before the end of the respective Planning Act timelines, the timing of which may vary at the decision of planning staff, based on such factors as the nature, scope, and complexity of the application, the submission of an amended application, and or significant changes to the proposal, Council's meeting schedule, and or other special circumstances that in the opinion of planning staff reasonably precludes the convening of a public meeting within this timeline. 7, that an enhanced signage program consistent with the town's corporate branding and image be implemented for site plan approval applications. 8, that regular monitoring and updates be implemented to the cobourg.ca website to improve user experience, such as the hot button, news center, Engage Cobourg, the calendar, planning application page, and that opportunities be explored regarding the use of other social media platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. 9, that the aforementioned revised public notification and engagement procedures be incorporated into the official plan during the next general update and review in 2022 or sooner if circumstances permit. 10, that the aforementioned revised public notification and engagement procedures be implemented effective January 1st, 2020. And 11, that additional staffing required to address impacts associated with increased complexities of planning applications and workflow and the reduced timelines of Bill 108, the More Homes, More Choice Act 2019, be referred to the 2020 municipal budget deliberations for consideration by council.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Next,
Mr.
Your Worship,
Muller?
we have Public Works Services under motions.
Councillor Darling?
I have a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Burkett. Whereas the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Director of Public Works regarding the award of the 2019 road resurfacing and water pollution control plant parking lot expansion contract. Now therefore be it resolved that Council approve the award of the 2020 road resurfacing and water pollution control plant parking lot expansion contract to Ashland Paving Limited in the amount of $524,377.60 plus HST. And further, that Council pre-approve a 2020 budget amount of $100,000 from the annual road resurfacing budget to be funded by the federal gas tax. And further, that Council pre-approve a 2020 budget amount of $17,792.10, including non-refundable HST, to pay for the repair work included in the Building 7 parking lot improvements to be funded as follows. Sanitary Sewer Reserve, $5,337.63, and Northern Industrial Park Reserve, $12,454.48.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Second motion, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bureau. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Director of Public Works regarding unfinished business items 08-21-17, traffic study lower Division Street Esplanade area, and 10-1017, traffic parking concerns Condo Corporation number 58-148 3rd Street. Now therefore be it resolved that Council approve the permanent one-way operation of the Esplanade and a new entrance into the 3rd Street parking lot.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, under motions, we have Parks and Recreation Services.
Councillor Chorley?
Item 1, motion from the Committee of the Whole to appoint a member to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas at the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered an application to fill a vacant position on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. Now therefore be it resolved that Council appoint Miriam Mouton to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for a term that corresponds with the current term of Council expiring on November 30th, 2022.
All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have motions under Protection Services.
Councillor Burkett?
I have one motion tonight, motion moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling, whereas the Committee of the Whole on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Secretary of the Accessibility Advisory Committee regarding a motion to create a subcommittee for a Town of Cobourg accessibility event. Now therefore be resolved that Council endorse the request of the Accessibility Advisory Committee and approve the creation of a subcommittee to organize a downtown accessibility awareness experience event in May 2020 during National Accessibility Week.
Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have motioned under Arts, Culture, and Tourism Services.
Councillor Burrow?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas the Committee of the Whole on November 25th, Council considered a notice of motion regarding the October opioid roundtable and report to council and recommended action for moving towards a coordinated community response. Now therefore be resolved that council endorse the HKLN drug strategies 4-pillar approach: harm reduction, prevention, education, treatment and justice, and enforcement, to inform the town of Cobourg's future role in response to the opioid crisis, and further that council endorse the Association of Municipalities of Ontario's recommendations for a provincial response to the opioid overdose emergency, and further that council direct the interim CAO, communications manager, and economic development to host a community-wide summit in partnership with the Cobourg Police to be held in February 2020 about the opioid crisis as a way to educate and engage the public on the matter, and further that council consider allocating $10,000 to support developing partnerships for a coordinated community response at the local level during 2020 budget deliberations, and further that council direct staff to publish a communication piece summarizing what the town of Cobourg is currently doing to support mental health, community safety, and affordable housing.
If I may, Councilor Barreau, I'm just going to ask you one slight question, if I may, on the second further that, when you say in February, I wonder if you would consider to be held by February 2020. And my rationale for that, because if I can work through the different partnerships and get it sooner, then I would hold it in January. But with the by, it means if I don't make January, you certainly by February would, rather than in. Would you give that?
I am A-okay with that.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe council will need that read again just from in to by at this point.
Okay. So
Any further discussion? See none, all in favor? Carried.
All right. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Darling. Whereas the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 25th, 2019, Council considered a memo from the Secretary of the Sustainability and Climate Change Advisory Committee regarding a motion to declare a climate emergency and accelerate GHG reduction actions in the town of Cobourg. Whereas municipalities have a significant role to help change and mitigate the contributions to climate change through responsible planning and budgeting, and whereas 462 Canadian municipalities have declared a climate emergency, including many in Ontario, with some setting ambitious emission reduction targets, such as net zero emissions by 2030, and whereas Council's strategic plan, it states the town of Cobourg will be a good stewards and practice sustainable actions, and whereas the town of Cobourg's official plan provides a general policy framework for the conservation of water, air quality, energy, and all other resources for the reduction of waste, as well as environmental stewardship, monitoring, and education, and for the development of a culture of conservation which reflects the principle of sustainable development. And whereas the Cobourg's official plan specifies that the town of Cobourg shall develop an integrated community sustainable plan, ICSP, which will be designed with the specific achievable actions for the community and will build on existing initiatives. And now therefore be resolved that Council of the Town of Cobourg declare a climate emergency, conveying its recognition that we are facing an unprecedented crisis requiring unprecedented climate mitigation measures. And further that, in response to this climate emergency, Council deemed the need to reduce the effects that the town of Cobourg is contributing to the climate crisis by way of the following actions. 1. Council create a staff position on a one-year contract basis under the supervision of the Chief Administrative Officer to develop a request for proposal, an RFP, for the Integrated Community Sustainable Plan, a green design standards, and manage the project through the completion. Number 2, refer all costs associated with the contract position and Integrated Community Sustainable Plan to the 2020 budget deliberations and have staff prepare a budget estimate for the January 2020 budget meeting. And number 3, update council's strategic plan to allow staff to reprioritize their work commitments to ensure that the staff resources will be significant to commence work on the Integrated Community Sustainable Plan prior to the scheduled start of 2021 as outlined in council's current approved strategic plan.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have bylaws, and first we have the General Government Services bylaws.
Deputy Mayor?
Bylaw number 1 is Bylaw 089-2019, being a bylaw to establish water rates and wastewater rates upon the owners or occupants of lands and premises connected to municipal water mains and sanitary sewers within the town of Cobourg. The action recommended that Council adopt Bylaw 089-2019, being a bylaw to establish water rates and wastewater rates upon the owners or occupants of lands and premises connected to municipal water mains and sanitary sewers within the town of Cobourg.
Seconder? Councilor Burkett, discussion? All in favor? Carried.
The second is Bylaw 067-2019, being a bylaw to adopt a staff and is there supposed to be a number here, Mr. Larmer? Council Relations Policy? We just passed it tonight? No, there was... Okay, there are just 2 number signs there, and I just... Okay. Council Relations Policy for the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg. Action recommended that Council adopt Bylaw 067-2019, being a bylaw to adopt a staff and council relations policy for the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg.
Seconder? Councilor Chorley, discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Third is a Bylaw 090-2019, being a bylaw to execute the agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg and Northumberland County to provide plumbing inspection and review services under Part 7 of the Ontario Building Code. The action recommended that Council adopt Bylaw 090-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the Mayor and Municipal Clerk to execute an agreement with Northumberland County to provide plumbing and inspection and review services under Part 7 of the Ontario Building Code.
Seconder? Councilor Burkett, discussion? All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, under bylaws, we have Planning and Development Services.
Councilor Beatty?
Thank you, Your Worship. The first bylaw is for Bylaw 091-2019, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 085-2003 for the property known municipally as 1111 Elgin Street West, the Northumberland Mall. The action recommended is that Council adopt bylaw number 091-2019, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 085-2003 for the property known municipally as 1111 Elgin Street West, or Northumberland Mall.
Seconder? Councilor Darling, discussion? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you. The second is a bylaw for number 092-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a development agreement with 264-2301 Ontario Limited and 2363-219 Ontario Limited and Lakefront Utility Services and the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg for 311 through to 325 University Avenue West and 387 William Street, Cobourg. The action recommended is that Council adopt the bylaw 092-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a development agreement with 2642-2301 Ontario Limited and 2363-219 Ontario Limited, Lakefront Utility Services Inc., and the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg for 311 through to 325 University Avenue West and 387 William Street, Cobourg.
Seconder? Councilor Burkett, discussion? All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer?
Next, Your Worship, we have Public Works Services.
Councilor Darling?
Thank you, Your Worship. The first one is a bylaw 093-2019, being a bylaw to approve the industrial surcharge agreement for the Candy Company. Action recommended that Council adopt bylaw 093-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and municipal clerk to execute an agreement with the Canada Candy Company and the town of Cobourg to enter into an industrial surcharge agreement.
Seconder. Councilor Barreau, discussion. All in favor? Carried.
The second is a bylaw 095-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with BTS Network Incorporated to operate extended accessible transit service. Action recommended that Council adopt bylaw 095-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with BTS Network Incorporated to operate extended accessible transit service.
Seconder. Councilor Burkett, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer.
The third reading of the bylaws of the Deputy Mayor General Government Services.
Deputy Mayor.
That the following bylaws be passed. 1. Bylaw 089-2019, being a bylaw to establish water rates and wastewater rates upon the owners or occupants of lands and premises connected to municipal water mains and sanitary sewers within the town of Cobourg. 2. Bylaw 067-2019, being a bylaw to adopt a staff and council relations policy for the corporation of the town of Cobourg. 3. Bylaw 090-2019. Sorry, my page just disappeared. Where did we go? There we are. Being a bylaw to execute the agreement between the corporation of the town of Cobourg and Northumberland County to provide plumbing inspection and review services under Part 7 of the Ontario Building Code. 4. Bylaw 091-2019, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 085-2003 for the property known municipally as 1111 Algon Street West, Northumberland Mall.
And Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt for a moment. I just want to be clear to Councilor Burkett. Did you declare for number 5, or did I mistake that in my notes? Thank you, Mr. Lark. Please continue. I just want to make sure I didn't make an error.
Okay. Number 5, Bylaw 092-2019, being a bylaw to authorize execution of a development agreement with 264-2301 Ontario Limited and 236-3219 Ontario Limited, Lakefront Utility Services, and the Corporation of the Town of Cobourg, 311-325 University Avenue West, and 387 William Street, Cobourg. And 6, Bylaw 093-2019, being a bylaw to approve the industrial surcharge agreement for the Canada Candy Company. The action recommended that leave be granted to introduce bylaw 089-2019 and bylaw 093-2019 and bylaw 067-2019, and to dispense with the reading of the bylaws by the municipal clerk, and that same be considered read and passed, and that the mayor and the municipal clerk sign the same and the seal of the corporation be thereto affixed.
Seconder. Councilor Burkett, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Back to the Deputy Mayor.
That the following bylaws be passed. Bylaw 095-2019, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with BTS Network, Inc. to operate extended accessible transit service. The action recommended that leave be granted to introduce bylaw 095-2019 and to dispense with the reading of the bylaw by the municipal clerk, and that the same be considered read and passed, and that the mayor and the municipal clerk sign the same and the seal of corporation be thereto affixed.
Seconder. Councilor Burkett, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer.
Next, Your Worship, the committee and board minutes are on the agenda for information purposes to council. And next, we have correspondence, and we have a letter under number 1 from Ted Williams, Cobourg resident, regarding the overall sidewalk plan public engagement.
Deputy Mayor.
The action recommended that council receive the correspondence from Ted Williams, Cobourg residents, for information purposes.
Seconder. Councilor Darling, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Mr. Larmer.
Next, Your Worship, we have council and coordinator announcements.
Thank you. Mine will be a little bit lengthy just because I'm trying to be inclusive of the dates we're not here over Christmas. I'd like to thank the newcomers through Northumberland for inviting me to a very cultural diverse dinner. I certainly enjoyed the evening, so thank you for that invite. For those who may be in our community and don't know of 100 Guys, this is a group of men who get together. The next date is December the 3rd at the Best Western at 7 p.m. And similarly to what's been done, who started this way back in the day of the Women Initiative, started this first, and we followed a great example. And we'll hear 3 community groups. We vote on one of those, and they are awarded with a $5,000 allotment to help their organization. If you feel you would like to join this large group, by all means come on out, watch the events, how they take place on December the 3rd, and see if this appeals to you. And of course, it's something that goes all year long, quarterly. For those that do watch, I know there are a number. The next Municipal Matters is this Wednesday, December the 4th at 7 p.m. That will be the last one for this year. I'd also like to ensure that I encourage you to come out to the Mayor's Skate. This year we have 2 dates of interest for you. Saturday, December 28th at 12 noon. And we have a second one on January the 1st, or I'll check that date, but certainly January 3rd, I apologize, for 2 p.m. Just to mention, I know we always have a great turnout for the Mayor's Levy. I'm hoping you will mark it on your calendar for January 1st. It's a long-standing tradition, and it starts at 2 p.m. Similarly, as you know through our many communications, Town of Cobourg has Rogers Hometown Hockey, and the 2 critical days of community involvement are January 4th and 5th. It will be at the waterfront, so dress in layers. It should be an awesome time. Just a reminder, again, that our next council session starts back on Monday, January 6th in the year of 2020. Just a part for council's attention in the community, the Board of Health dealt with a particular issue, and we dealt with vaping. And we felt vaping needed to be recognized, so there are a number of restrictions that we've requested. I'll make sure that Tony Gallia types this up and make sure you get it, because there are quite a number. But we're really following the model that was promoted in British Columbia. And we have sent that board letter to Minister Patty Hedju, Minister of Health in Canada, and Minister Elliott, who's also the Minister of Health for the province of Ontario. And we feel that these restrictions really have to be taken seriously, especially for our youth who are under the age of 21. That is my announcement, and on behalf of Council, senior staff, and our CAO, I wish everyone in our community a wonderful Christmas and a delightful New Year. Deputy Mayor, over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mine's a little shorter. You're a busy guy. As Budget Chief, I wanted to thank staff and my fellow council members for taking part in our long 2020 budget presentation meetings. The Finance Department will be issuing the draft budget on December 13th for review and comment, and Council will be meeting on January 9th and 10th, if needed, for final deliberations to reach our goal of a 1.9% tax levy increase. We will have some difficult choices to make to achieve this, and we need to remember that there are many residents here in Cobourg, as we heard this evening, that live on fixed incomes, and when we are here to serve them. Tuesday, December the 3rd, tomorrow, is Giving Tuesday in Northumberland County, and we encourage everyone to give what they can to a charity that would welcome your donation during this time of the year, and there are many. And tomorrow is also the first anniversary of this council being sworn in. Thanks to my fellow council colleagues for working together to make Cobourg a better place to live, grow business, and enjoy life. And also I wanted to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Okay, and we're moving on next to Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will keep this short and concise as well. Just a reminder to council colleagues, staff, and members of the public, this Thursday, December 5th, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. at the Citizens Forum in Victoria Hall. We will be having the public launch of the Affordable Housing Community Improvement Program. So I encourage everyone to come out for that. And just a notable mention to the Planning Department and Director McGlashan. Mr. McGlashan went to Toronto last week, I believe it was, for the Brownie Awards. This is an annual award recognition ceremony for innovative and leading community development projects with a focus on brownfields. And our tannery project was one of the 3 finalists for a Brownie. We were not successful, but a competitive nomination process, and the fact that our tannery project was recognized was excellent. And on that note, with prioritizing the affordable housing programming this year, now that that's in the pipeline, I'm happy to announce that the final phase of the tannery project will be activated in early 2020. So much more to come on that subject matter as we roll into 2020. And again, too, just happy holidays to our staff. I know they deserve the break after a very busy year. To all the community advisory committee members, as well as citizens who've taken interest in planning and development in 2019. And if I may, this is also the eve of our 1 year of taking oath on December 3rd. So congratulations to council colleagues on 1 year since we took our oath here at Town Hall.
Thank you. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Worship. We'll keep it short and sweet. Effective November 1st to March 31st from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., parking is prohibited on all collector and arterial roads, as well as certain residential streets that are listed and mapped on the town's website. This is in accordance with the winter parking restrictions bylaw 080-2014, which is enforced by the Cobourg Police Department. So what we ask you, please do your best to remove cars and from the roadway, that snow plows can remove all the snow on the road during their first pass, which saves them from having to come back and do it a second time, which sometimes aggravates our citizens when they show their sidewalk and then they got to move the snow back again and they have to do it a second time. And I'd just like to wish staff, council, and the citizens a happy holiday and a safe one. And that's my report.
Thank you for that. Councillor Chorley.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. I'm going to start with recreation. The gym at the CCC will be closed for some maintenance and repairs, and that will happen between December 29th and January 10th. And program registration at the CCC has opened, and that's for winter 2020. New programs include a personal safety class and the Hello Wellness Lunch and Learn program. Regarding waterfront operations, the Waterfront Administration building is closed for the winter, and waterfront staff are now working out of the CCC. Regarding parks, the new play space equipment at Peter Delanty Park is now being installed. Completion is expected early next week, and that is weather permitting. And I'd like to take a moment to just give a big thank you to all of the staff who worked so hard to install Christmas lights in Rotary Waterfront Park and in Victoria Park. They really do look spectacular, and I've had lots of positive feedback about the display. I think it's great to see those lights back in Victoria Park, and that was based on the recommendation of the Christmas Magic Ad Hoc Committee. So thank you to Bruce Moore, who got the ball rolling on that issue, and the citizen members of that committee. And just quickly, we've got some upcoming events at the CCC. The Cobourg Cougars games are happening December 9th, 16th, and the 23rd. December 6th, there is the Seniors Christmas Party, which will include dinner and dancing, so that sounds like fun. December 24th, there's a Christmas Eve church service happening at the CCC that's organized for the community by the Cobourg Alliance Church, and that begins at the CCC at 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve. And on December 28th, the mayor's already mentioned this, it will be the mayor's skating party. That's going to be free skating at the bowl from noon until 1:30 p.m. And that's everything from Parks and Rec.
And if I can add just a bit, because I just reminded myself to a bit of parks, I will be flipping pancakes, I'm sure, along with other members of council. I believe it's December the 14th as part of their fundraiser. And I have also learned that the Y has agreed to run what's called Operations Red Nose. So I would say to council, if you've never seen it, get out, maybe be part of one night. It's a long night, but it's a fun night. And of course, that's when they make sure you get home safely for a donation. So thank you for that, Councillor Charlie, as well. Moving on, Councillor Burkett.
Thank you, Your Worship. From the police services, on November 15th, they opened, in partnership with Cornerstone Family Violence Prevention Center, a new soft interview space in the police station. This is just another effort of showing partnerships in the community that the Cobourg Police Services is doing to better the community. Also from the police services, I'd just like to thank them in their efforts to, I know it's very frustrating to combat any of the drug issues that are going on in the community, and I know they're making a lot of efforts, and as you can see in the media, and I know it's frustrating at times that you see it's frequent offenders, but I know that they're going to keep pushing forward and see if we can get a better hold on it. So I'd just like to thank the many efforts of the Cobourg Police Services in what they've been doing with that. In building, they're very busy, as always, with dealing with a lot more permits, a lot more property standards, and I'd just like to commend the hardworking staff in the building department and getting, those statutory requirements done, as well as all the doing their best to deal with the ongoing issues within the town of Cobourg. And can't forget fire, going into the winter season here with a lot of, potential emergencies. So for first responders, I wish them, good luck with the busy season coming up, and I'd just like to thank them for putting their efforts forward as well. And thank the rest of the members of council for this, like my other colleagues have said, for this, I guess, year. It's surprising that it's already been that long. And, I'd like to wish everyone happy holidays and good luck into the new year. Councillor Barreau.
All right. I'm going to expand a little bit on some of the stuff that everybody else has said this evening. The Christmas magic, thank you. We want to take this opportunity to say a big thank you to all the groups that help bring Christmas magic in Cobourg. Thank you again to the ad hoc committee. To Jackie Chapman-Davis for spearheading the initiative, and to the many others who contributed countless hours. We couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. One of the volunteers, David Crease, has volunteered for 18 years on Christmas Magic. Just want to give a good shout out to him and a Merry Christmas. To the many of the staff who truly stepped up to the plate and supported us with their time and equipment, from the Parks Department, Stu Defoe, Rick Cromlish, Graham Henke, Kevin Sinclair, Eddie Cork, Cameron Murphy, and Gavin McNamara. From the Public Works, David, I hope I say this right, Tenjor, Dwayne McInnes, Mitch Murphy, and Daryl Prague. From the Building Maintenance, Sally LeBlanc, David Storms, Kelly Tapscott, and Mitchell Scott. Also, in case anybody hasn't heard, Rogers Hometown Hockey is coming January 4th and 5th. Tomorrow night, there'll be, and also December 3rd and December 17th, at the Cobourg Public Library, they're having a free video game night. They have this every other Tuesday, and you play different games like Super Smash Brothers, Dungeons and Dragons, Pokemon cards, Magic, The Gathering. It's a great event. They have last time they had it, there was on November 19th. There was 55 people that came, And there's also free pizza and subs, by the way. And that's tomorrow starting at 5 o'clock till 8. On December 7th, there'll be a Christmas carol at the concert hall. On December 7th, the reindeer run at Victoria Park. December 10th, jazz in the afternoon at the concert hall. December 8th, Sultans of String. December 9th, Experience Christmas with John McDermott. December 22nd, the concert band of Cobourg at the annual Christmas show. December 27th, also Al McCartney live at the concert hall. December 31st, Elton Ron concert at the concert hall. And also December 31st, first night at Rotary Harbourfront Park. And the Cobourg's Farmers Market every Saturday until December 21st at the Marketplace building. And I do want to say it's been a great year. I've learned a ton off of every single one of you, and I'm proud to be sitting with all of you. Thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. And back to you, Mr. Larmer.
Thanks, Your Worship. The unfinished business is listed in the agenda, and there's a closed session.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. The council meeting closed
Sorry,
session.
just a point of order.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Charlie, I missed your hand. I apologize.
I just wanted to have a look at the unfinished business. Sorry. I just wanted to draw council's attention to the MOU to be provided to council regarding Cobourg Dragon Boat and Canoe Club. And this has a deadline of December 2nd, which unfortunately, despite really positive meetings and negotiations, the deadline, it has not been possible to meet it, which is today. So I would respectfully like to put on the floor and ask council's permission that we just put forward a motion to extend this deadline. And I believe January 27th would be inappropriate. That is a committee of the whole meeting. The clerk can just verify that for me. I don't have the schedule here. But I just want to emphasize this motion was passed in July. It was due in September. Council decided to extend it to December. And so I would just ask one more month to be able to bring this back to council. And I think we will be able to do that without further extension.
And just for my information, because I believe the unofficial business, do I need a motion or is it just noted because that's for our record keeping? I just need some clarity. Thank you. So you're okay with the January 20 as indicated? So would you like to put, okay, so you'd like to put the motion on the floor, Councillor Charlie, and then I'll have it voted on.
So the motion would be that council extend the deadline for the MOU regarding the Cobourg Dragon Boat and Canoe Club to January 27th, 2020.
Seconder, Councillor Darling, discussion. All in favor? Carried. Were there any other points? Councillor Charlie, I just apologize for missing your hand there.
No, but it would be wonderful if we could get an explanation perhaps from the CAO regarding the terms of reference regarding a social planning or community development advisory committee.
Mr. Davey?
I would refer that back to Mr. Larmer, perhaps.
Mr. Larmer?
Yes, through you to members of council, as requested by the CAO. The clerk's department as well as the planning department, especially in the clerk's department, I can't speak for Mr. McGlashan, but I'm learning a lot this year with affordable housing and community development. And what we've been doing is formulating a lot of information, working directly with Rebecca Carman, as well as the manager of homeless. I can't remember her name at the county, but what we're trying to do is formulate partnership to come with a consistent approach for doing this. Speaking and working with the director, we're developing our CIP, the stuff, motions and bylaws passed tonight as well as earlier in this year in April. So what we're trying to do is formulate everything together, and we're hoping that we can have something to council by the start of next year. We are going to be bringing a little bit tweaks to the terms of reference anyways in the start of next year. So we're going to introduce another appendix which would involve that, depending on what when I meet with the director of planning development regarding something going forward. So
with your statement being noted, would you like to suggest a different deadline date? Because obviously we've surpassed November 25th.
So, Your Worship, if I can, hopefully, what I'm hoping is to do the February 18th. The reason I'm pushing it to February is because we're trying to get back to the clerk's office as well as budget is happening with council too. So the clerk's office is going to be obviously preparing agendas for that. So we're looking at actually bringing some amendments to procedure bylaw, some other things in regarding this nature. So if the director is okay, I think February 18th we can probably formulate a report and something to council, at least a direction.
Mr. McGlash, is that a nod or would you like some more time? Because obviously it's going to take a multi-department focus. I'm just inquiring.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that would be fine. We'll certainly work with Mr. Larmer. It's a totally new committee or advisory committee, and that needs a little bit of research. And I know that Mr. Larmer's been diligent when he can to get some of that research done. But I think we can certainly get something. We'll try to get something to council on the 18th.
Okay, is there a member who would like to move this as a motion? And then we'll, Councillor Beattie.
Yes, and that was February 18th to the clerk. Yes. I move to update the unfinished business deadline for the memo, for the terms of reference for a social planning and community development framework to be received by council for February 18th, 2020.
Seconder. Councillor Chorley, discussion, all in favor? Carried. Okay, Deputy Mayor.
The council meeting closed session in accordance with section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 regarding S 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. Is that right? I didn't think so. Because the two don't fit. To be or not to be. Do you have a... Okay. Yeah, I just don't have last month's. Okay. Okay, so S 239(1)B, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and the employee compensation evaluation review.
Seconder. Councillor Burrow, all in favor? Carried.